The Motown sound, the heartbeat of an era, was not merely created with the smooth vocals of Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson, or the charismatic moves of the Supremes or the Temptations. It was forged in the unyielding rhythm section, a foundational groove that emanated from the skilled hands of session musicians, especially the bass players. In the world of Motown, these bassists were more than just musicians. They were the architects of a revolutionary sound. For so many years, due to Motown session players rarely receiving any sleeve credits, these fabulous players remained a complete mystery to the record-buying public and remained unsung heroes. This mini-documentary delves into the lives and influence of some of the most famous session bass players of Motown. Jamerson, the iconic groove architect. Any discussion about Motown's bass players inevitably starts with Jamerson. His bass lines were not just supportive, they were melodies and hooks in their own right. With his signature Fender precision bass, Jamerson painted the canvas of hits like My Girl by the Temptations and Dancing in the Street by Martha and the Vandellas, and so many more. His ability to meld intricate melodies with deep groove elevated the role of the bass in popular music. Born in 1936, a native of Edisto Island, South Carolina, James moved with his mother to Detroit in 1954. He began playing in Detroit-area blues and jazz clubs, but eventually found his way to Berry Gordy's Hitsville studio in 1959, where he started to receive steady session work, where one of the first tracks he recorded was Way Over There, a single by Smokey Robinson. Jamerson's earliest sessions were performed on double bass, but in the early 60s, he switched to playing an electric Fender precision bass. One aspect of Jamerson's upright playing that carried over to the electric bass was the fact that he generally used only his right index finger to pluck the strings while resting his third and fourth fingers on the Fender's chrome pickup cover. Jamerson's index finger even earned its own nickname, the Hook. This in itself is extraordinary, given that pretty much all bass players, including myself, need to use two fingers to try and replicate some of James' more syncopated 16-note licks, and is a further example of just what an extraordinary player he was. His session credits are far too weighty to be listed here, but suffice to say it was James, particularly with early 60s tracks, that played the bass on your favorite Motown songs. One of my favorites was his incredible contribution to Bernadette by the Four Tops. Another great example is his astonishingly groovy contribution to Stevie Wonder's For Once in My Life, which is a personal favorite of mine and is a symphony all on its own. James performed on 23 #1 hits and nearly every Motown recording between 1963 and 1968. One of the most famous stories about James is his contribution to Marvin Gaye's iconic What's Going On. In order to record the title track, Gaye had to locate Jamerson and found him in a local bar, slightly worse for wear. By the time he got him to the studio, the bassist could barely stand up. Such was the genius of the man. He played the song horizontally, lying flat on the floor. According to Motown piano player Joe Hunter, Jamerson could drink. Man, he could drink. He used to say he played better when he was loosened up. That's when he'd go right out there. One time, Berry Gordy had to go and carry him back from a drinking club to a session. That bass line you hear on What's Going On by Marvin, Jamerson played that lying flat on his back, right there on the studio floor. Shortly after Motown moved their headquarters to Los Angeles, California, in 1972, Jamerson moved there himself and found occasional studio work, but his relationship with Motown officially ended in 1973. He went on to perform on such 1970s hits as Neither One of Us by Gladys Knight and the Pips, Boogie Down, Eddie Kendricks, Boogie Fever, The Silvers, You Don't Have to Be a Star to Be in My Show, Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr. However, in Los Angeles, Jamerson was not working with a steady group of musicians, and he was not as free to improvise. He felt out of place, and over time his increased dependence on alcohol affected his work, which slowly began to dry up. By the 1980s, he was unable to get any serious gigs working as a session player. After a long battle with alcoholism, sadly James died on August 2nd, 1983. He was only 47 years old. His long-lasting influence can be heard in virtually every genre, showcasing his timeless impact. So many great bass players have cited James as major influence on their playing. These include Paul McCartney, John Entwistle, Sting, John Paul Jones, Jaco Pastorius, Chuck Rainey, Stanley Clarke, Jack Bruce, and many, many more. In its special issue, The 100 Greatest Bass Players in 2017, Bass Player magazine ranked James Jamerson number 1 and called him the most important and influential bass guitarist of all time. He has certainly been the greatest influence on me. Bob Babbit, The Groove Machine. Bob Babbit, another luminary of the Motown bass world, was renowned for his impeccable timing and unshakable groove. Babbit was Hungarian-American and was born in 1937 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He stepped into Jamerson's shoes when health issues limited the latter's sessions. Babbit's work on hits like Signed, Sealed, Delivered, I'm Yours by Stevie Wonder and War by Edwin Starr showcased his ability to adapt while maintaining the Motown essence and excellence. His precision and creativity ensured that the Motown sound continued to thrive. His extraordinary list of credits include The Tears of a Clown by Smokey Robinson and The Miracles, Mercy, Mercy Me, The Ecology, and Inner City Blues by Marvin Gaye, Band of Gold by Freda Payne, Ball of Confusion, That's What the World Is Today, and Just My Imagination, Running Away With Me by The Temptations, Touch Me in the Morning by Diana Ross, and Just Don't Want to Be Lonely by The Main Ingredient. He also participated in hundreds of other hits, including Little Town Flirt by Del Shannon and Scorpio by Dennis Coffey and the Detroit Guitar Band. He also played on the Jimi Hendrix album Crash Landing. He's ranked number 59 on Bass Player magazine's list of the 100 greatest bass players of all time. Bob Babbit died on July 16, 2012, age 74 from brain cancer. Carol Kaye, Breaking Barriers. While not exclusively a Motown player, Carol Kaye made significant contributions to the genre. She was part of the Wrecking Crew, a group of studio musicians in Los Angeles who played on numerous hit records during the 1960s and 1970s. Kaye's bass work on songs like Love Is Here and Now You're Gone by the Supremes added a unique flavor to the Motown repertoire. As a female bass player in a male-dominated industry, she broke barriers and inspired generations of musicians. Kaye was born in Everett, Washington, to professional musicians Clyde and Dot Smith. At age 13, Kaye received a steel string guitar from her mother and began teaching professionally the following year. She began playing sessions in jazz clubs around Los Angeles. She started session work in 1957, and through a connection at Gold Star Studios began working for producers Phil Spector and Brian Wilson. After a bassist failed to turn up to a session in 1963, she switched to that instrument, quickly making a name for herself as one of the most in-demand session players of the 1960s, playing on numerous hits. Her work with producer Phil Spector, playing on Bob B. Sox and the Blue Jeans' Zip-a-Dee-Doo-Dah and the Crystals' Then He Kissed Me, quickly attracted the attention of other record producers, and she found herself in demand as a regular session player. Other notable sessions she played on were The Righteous Brothers, You've Lost That Loving Feeling, Glenn Campbell's Wichita Lineman, Nancy Sinatra's These Boots Were Made for Walking, and the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds album. As far as her contribution to Motown goes, she played on some iconic tracks including Love Is Here and Now You're Gone by the Supremes, In and Out of Love by the Supremes, Someday We'll Be Together, the Diana Ross and the Supremes version, and many more. There is some controversy over who exactly played the iconic bass line on Love Child. Some say James Jamerson, others Carol Kaye. For me, if it is a choice between the two, I would say Carol Kaye, as the recorded part is clearly played with a pick, something that James Jamerson never used and Kaye did. Quincy Jones said in his 2001 autobiography Q that women like Fender bass player Carol Kaye could do anything and leave men in the dust. Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys has said that Kaye's playing on the Good Vibrations sessions was a key part of the arrangement he wanted. Carol played bass with a pick that clicked real good. It worked out really well. It gave it a hard sound. She's one of the most prolific recorded bass guitarists in rock and pop music, playing on an estimated 10,000 recordings in a career spanning over 65 years. At the time of this video, Carol Kaye is alive and well, and is 88 years old. In 2020, Rolling Stone magazine ranked Kaye number 5 in its list of the 50 greatest bassists of all time. Wilton Felder, the jazz virtuoso. Wilton Felder's journey from jazz to Motown exemplifies the genre-blurring nature of Motown's music. Felder, originally a jazz saxophonist, transitioned seamlessly into the role of a session bass player. His work on tracks like Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye showcased his ability to infuse jazz sensibilities into the Motown groove. His improvisational skills and melodic approach added a sophisticated layer to Motown's sound. Felder was born in 1940 in Houston, Texas, and studied music at Texas Southern University. Felder, Wayne Henderson, Joe Sample, and Styx Hooper founded their group while in high school in Houston. The Jazz Crusaders, later known as the Crusaders of Street Life fame, evolved from a straight-ahead jazz combo into a pioneering jazz-rock fusion group with a definite soul music influence. Felder worked with the original group for over 30 years and continued to work in its later versions, which often featured other founding members. Felder also worked as a West Coast studio musician, mostly playing electric bass for various soul and R&B musicians, and was one of the in-house bass players for Motown Records when the record label opened operations in Los Angeles in the early 1970s. He played on recordings by the Jackson 5 such as ABC and The Love You Save and I Want You Back. Also of note were his contributions to the John Cale album Paris 1919, Steely Dan's Pretzel Logic, and Billy Joel's Piano Man and Street Life Serenade albums. Felder died in 2015 at his home in Whittier, California, from multiple myeloma. He was 75 years old. Motown's session bass players were not mere accompanists. They were sonic architects who shaped the soulful, rhythmic foundation of an entire era. Their innovative techniques, melodic prowess, and unwavering groove set the stage for generations of bass players to come. As the somewhat unsung heroes of Motown, their influence reverberates through the annals of music history to this day, reminding us that sometimes it's not the spotlight, but the deep, resonant pulse that truly defines a musical legacy. They certainly changed my life and probably yours too. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe